The last thing Sarah Oliverson expected when she stepped off the stagecoach in Trinity, Texas in the summer of 1882, was to find her fiancé in the arms of another woman. But there they were, plain as day, wrapped around each other outside the saloon like she did not exist at all. Her traveling trunk hit the dusty ground with a thud that matched the feeling in her chest. 23 years old, she had traveled all the way from Boston with nothing but the clothes on her back, a small inheritance from her late mother, and promises written in letters that now felt like lies. Charles had written about their future, about the dress shop she would help him establish, about the life they would build together in this frontier town. He had failed to mention Margaret, the saloon girl who was currently kissing him like her life depended on it. Charles. Sarah's voice came out smaller than she intended, nearly swallowed by the hot Texas wind that whipped down the main street. He turned, and the color drained from his face. "Sarah, you are early. I thought you were not arriving until next month, clearly." She straightened her traveling dress, trying to maintain some dignity even as her world crumbled. "My letter must not have reached you. I was able to book earlier passage." Margaret disentangled herself from Charles, looking Sarah up and down with an expression that was not quite apologetic. "So this is the Boston girl you have been talking about." "We're talking about," Sarah corrected, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "Past tense." She turned to Charles, who had the decency to look ashamed. "I assume there is no dress shop either. Sarah, please let me explain. Margaret and we did not mean for this to happen. You have to understand you were so far away and she was here, and I thought maybe you would not actually come. Well, I did come, and now I will find somewhere else to be." She picked up her trunk, though it was far heavier than she could comfortably carry, and started walking down the street with no destination in mind. Pride kept her spine straight and her chin up, even as tears threatened to spill over. She would not cry in front of them. She would not give them that satisfaction. The trunk made it about 50 feet before her arms began to shake. She set it down hard, breathing heavily in the oppressive heat. Boston summers had not prepared her for Texas in July. The sun beat down mercilessly, and she realized with growing panic that she had nowhere to go, knew no one in this town, and had just watched her entire planned future evaporate like water on these scorching streets. "That is quite a walk you are attempting with that load." The voice came from behind her, low and warm with a hint of amusement that was not unkind. Sarah turned to find a man leaning against a hitching post. One boot crossed over the other in a casual stance that somehow conveyed complete confidence. He was tall, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that curled slightly beneath his worn hat. His eyes, a startling green against his tanned face, held genuine curiosity rather than pity, which was the only reason she did not tell him to mind his own business. "I will manage," she said, though they both knew it was not true. "I am sure you would eventually. But it is about 103 degrees right now, and unless you are part lizard, I would guess you will be flat on your face in the dust within another 50 feet. He pushed off from the post and walked over, moving with an easy grace that spoke of someone comfortable in his own skin. "Jack Garrett. People call me Jack, and before you tell me off for interfering, I should mention that there is a boarding house about 3 blocks that way." He pointed west. "Mrs. Henderson runs it. She is fair, honest, and her rooms are clean. She will also likely have a job for you if you need one, because I heard her saying just yesterday that she needed help now that her daughter moved to San Antonio." Sarah studied him, trying to determine if this was some kind of trick or if genuine kindness existed in Trinity, Texas. "Why would you help me?" "Because I just watched what happened back there with Charles Thompson, and I figured you could use a break." He picked up her trunk like it weighed nothing. "Also, because Charles is a fool, and I have always enjoyed pointing that out whenever possible. Despite everything, Sarah felt a smile tug at her lips. You know him, unfortunately. We went to school together, back when Trinity was even smaller than it is now. He has always been the kind of man who wants everything but commits to nothing. Jack started walking, and after a moment, Sarah followed. I am sorry your welcome to Texas was not what you expected. That is a polite way of saying I just got my heart broken in public. I was trying to be a gentleman about it. You can stop. I appreciate the help, but I do not need anyone treating me like I am made of glass. I am angry more than heartbroken, if I am being honest. Angry at him and angry at myself for being so naive. Jack glanced at her with something like respect. Fair enough. Then I will say it straight. Charles is an idiot, you are better off, and Trinity is not a bad place to start over if you have the spine for it. Which, based on the last few minutes, I would say you do. They walked in silence for a bit, past the general store, the blacksmith, and a small church that looked like it had been built recently. Trinity was larger than Sarah had expected, with several cross streets and numerous businesses that suggested a thriving community. In the distance, she could hear the lowing of cattle and the shouts of men working. What do you do, Jack Garrett? She asked, partly out of curiosity and partly to distract herself from the fact that her entire life plan had just disintegrated. I work the Broken Arrow Ranch about 5 miles north of town. I am the foreman there. We run cattle mostly, some horses. It is good work, honest work. And you just happened to be in town when I arrived. I came in for supplies. Lucky timing, I suppose. He stopped in front of a large, well-maintained house with a wide porch and flowers planted in boxes beneath the windows. This is Mrs. Henderson's place. Before they could knock, the door swung open to reveal a plump woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a kind smile. Jack Garrett, what have you brought me? A new arrival who needs a room and possibly a job. Mrs. Henderson, this is Sarah Oliverson from Boston. She just arrived in town and had some unfortunate news regarding her plans. Mrs. Henderson's eyes softened with understanding. I saw what happened. Charles Thompson is a snake, always has been. Come in, dear, come in. Let us get you settled and get some water in you before you keel over from this heat. The interior of the boarding house was blessedly cooler, with high ceilings and windows positioned to catch any breeze. It was clean and smelled faintly of lavender and fresh bread. Mrs. Henderson led them through a tidy parlor to a room on the first floor. This is my best room, she said, opening the door to reveal a space with a real bed, a dresser, a washstand, and even a small desk by the window. I charge $3 a week, meals included. If you want the job helping me run this place, I will take $1 off your rent. Mostly it is cooking, cleaning, and helping me manage the other boarders. Nothing too difficult, but it is steady work. Sarah calculated quickly. Her inheritance would last a few months if she was careful, longer if she had income. I will take both the room and the job. When do I start? Tomorrow is soon enough. Today you rest and get your bearings. Jack, thank you for bringing her. You are a good man, even if you do spend too much time with those horses and not enough time finding yourself a wife. Jack laughed, a sound that seemed to come easily to him. You sound like my mother, Mrs. Henderson. Your mother is a wise woman. Now go on, I am sure you have work to do. Sarah and I will get along just fine. After Jack left, Mrs. Henderson helped Sarah unpack and brought her a pitcher of cool water and a plate of bread and cheese. Take your time settling in. Dinner is at 6, and I will introduce you to the other boarders then. There are 4 others currently, all working men, all respectful and decent. I do not tolerate any nonsense under my roof. Thank you, Sarah said, meaning it deeply. I do not know what I would have done without your kindness. That is what we do here. We look out for each other, Mrs. Henderson paused at the door. And Sarah, that Jack Garrett is one of the finest men in Trinity. He did not have to help you today, but he did, because that is who he is. Remember that. After Mrs. Henderson left, Sarah sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to cry. Not because she still loved Charles, she was realizing she probably never had truly loved him, but because she had built a future in her mind that was now completely gone. She cried for her naivety, for the security she had lost, for the fear of the unknown that stretched out before her. But she also felt something unexpected beneath the tears, a small flicker of something that might have been relief. She was free of obligations now, free of Charles and his lies, free to build whatever life she wanted here in this strange new place. The tears stopped sooner than she expected, and Sarah stood to wash her face in the basin. Her reflection in the small mirror showed a young woman with brown hair coming loose from its pins, blue eyes that were red but determined, and a stubborn set to her jaw that she recognized as pure Oliverson stubbornness. Her mother had worn the same expression when she decided to invest what little money they had in Sarah's education, insisting that her daughter would have opportunities she never had. "Well, Mama," Sarah said to the mirror, "I suppose I am having an adventure now, whether I wanted one or not." That evening, dinner at Mrs. Henderson's table was a surprisingly pleasant affair. The other boarders were indeed respectful and welcoming. There was Thomas, who worked at the bank, Michael, who was a clerk at the general store, Richard, who taught at the small schoolhouse, and David, who worked as a deputy for the town marshal. They were curious about Sarah but not prying, and the conversation flowed easily over Mrs. Henderson's excellent pot roast. "What brought you to Trinity?" Richard asked, passing Sarah the potatoes. "A mistake," Sarah said honestly, and was relieved when they all nodded knowingly. "Charles Thompson," David said. "Jack mentioned what happened when he came by the marshal's office earlier. Sorry you had to deal with that." "I am realizing I dodged a bullet, as you might say out here," Michael laughed. "Quick learner. You are going to do just fine in Texas." Over the next few days, Sarah fell into a routine that was surprisingly comforting. She rose early to help Mrs. Henderson prepare breakfast, cleaned rooms, helped with laundry, and assisted with dinner preparations. The work was harder than anything she had done in Boston, but it was also straightforward and honest. No one expected her to be anything other than herself, and there was freedom in that. She saw Jack Garrett 3 more times that first week, always briefly. Once at the general store, where he tipped his hat and asked how she was settling in. Once outside the church on Sunday, where he introduced her to his mother, a warm woman who immediately invited Sarah to dinner the following week. And once from her window, where she saw him riding past on a beautiful black horse, moving with the same easy grace he showed on foot. "You are staring," Mrs. Henderson said, startling Sarah. "I was just looking at the horse. It is beautiful. Hum. That is Thunder. Jack raised him from a colt. He has a way with horses that is something special. Can read them like most people read books." Mrs. Henderson joined her at the window. "He is a good man, Sarah, not like Charles Thompson. When Jack Garrett gives his word, he keeps it. When he cares about something, he commits fully. He is the kind of man you can build a life with." "I am not looking to build a life with any man right now," Sarah said, but she did not move away from the window. "I am not saying you are. I am just saying that, when you are ready, there are worse places to look than at a man who stops his day to help a stranger for no reason other than it is the right thing to do." 2 weeks after her arrival in Trinity, Sarah was hanging laundry in the backyard when Jack appeared at the fence. "Mrs. Henderson said I might find you out here." "Is something wrong?" Sarah asked, shielding her eyes from the sun. "No, nothing wrong. I have a proposition for you if you are interested." He opened the gate and came into the yard, removing his hat in a gesture that seemed automatic. "I heard you mention to my mother last week that you used to ride back in Boston." "A little. My mother worked for a family that kept horses, and the son used to let me ride sometimes. It has been years, though. Would you like to learn again? Really learn, I mean. Western riding, not that English saddle stuff." His green eyes held a challenge that made Sarah's heart beat faster. "Why would you teach me?" "Because you look like you are adjusting well to most things in Trinity, but I also see how you watch the horses when they go by. You have that look people get when they miss something important, and because I think you might understand what it feels like riding out under the open sky. Real freedom." He paused. "Also, I promised my mother I would be nice to you, and she is terrifying when she is disappointed." Sarah laughed. "I met her. She is terrifying regardless. See, you are learning, so what do you say? I am free most evenings around sunset. It is cooler then, and the moon has been rising early lately. Good light for riding. I do not have proper clothes for riding. I saw you wearing trousers under your dress when you were on that ladder yesterday, washing windows. Those will work fine. This is Texas, Sarah, not Boston. Nobody cares much about propriety when it comes to practical matters. She should say no. She should focus on her work, on building her savings, on creating stability after everything had fallen apart. But something in Jack's offer called to a part of her that had been suffocated in Boston, buried under expectations and proprieties and plans that were never really hers. "All right," she said. "When do we start?" "Tonight, if you are free. I will bring a gentle mare. Her name is Willow, and she has the patience of a saint. You will meet me at the edge of town near the old oak tree. 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock, Sarah agreed, and tried to ignore the way her stomach flipped at the thought. Mrs. Henderson was delighted when Sarah asked for the evening off. "Of course, dear. Go, enjoy yourself. You have been working hard, and young people should have some fun." She handed Sarah a small package. "Take these biscuits. You might get hungry." That evening, Sarah changed into her practical clothes, braided her hair tightly, and walked to the edge of town as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Jack was already there, holding the reins of 2 horses. One was Thunder, the magnificent black stallion she had seen before. The other was a smaller chestnut mare with a white blaze down her face and gentle eyes. "Sarah, meet Willow. Willow, this is Sarah, who is going to be your new friend." Jack's voice was soft as he stroked the mare's neck. "Come here. Let her smell you, get used to you." Sarah approached slowly, extending her hand as Jack had done. Willow's nose was soft as velvet against her palm, her breath warm. "Hello, beautiful girl. Good, you have a natural touch." Some people approach horses with fear or aggression, and horses sense that. You are calm. He moved to stand beside Sarah. "Now, let me show you how we saddle up out here." For the next half hour, Jack taught Sarah the basics. How to check the saddle, how to adjust the stirrups, how to mount from the left side. His instructions were clear and patient, and he never made her feel foolish for asking questions. When she finally sat in the saddle, she felt a surge of something powerful. "How does it feel?" Jack asked, swinging up onto Thunder with practiced ease. "Tall and a little scary, but also exciting." "Good, that is exactly right. Now we are going to start slow. Just walk beside me. Let Willow do most of the work. You focus on your posture and getting comfortable with the rhythm." They started down a well-worn path that led away from town, toward open grassland that stretched toward the darkening sky. The sun painted everything gold and orange, and the air began to cool from its daytime heat. Sarah found the rhythm Jack mentioned, the gentle sway of the horse beneath her, the creak of the saddle, the soft sound of hooves on packed earth. "This is beautiful," she said, looking around at the vast landscape. She had never seen so much open space, so much sky. In Boston, buildings crowded together, blocking views and limiting horizons. Here she could see for miles in every direction. "It is," Jack agreed. "I have been all over Texas and I always come back to Trinity. There is something about this place, especially at this time of day." He glanced at her. "You are doing great, by the way. Natural seat, good hands. I think you understated your riding experience." "I loved it when I was younger. I used to dream about having my own horse, riding whenever I wanted, but that was a fantasy for a girl in my position." "What position was that?" "Poor. My father died when I was young. My mother worked as a housekeeper. We had enough to get by, but not enough for luxuries like horses or riding lessons. The only reason I got to ride at all was because the son of the family where my mother worked took pity on me." "That does not sound like pity. That sounds like someone recognized you belonged on horseback." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the landscape gradually changing as the sun sank lower. When they reached a small rise, Jack stopped. "This is my favorite spot. Watch." The sun touched the horizon and seemed to melt into it, turning the sky into a canvas of colors Sarah had never imagined. Purples and pinks and oranges that defied description, all reflected in the scattered clouds above. As the last light faded, the moon rose on the opposite horizon, nearly full and bright enough to cast shadows. "Oh," Sarah breathed. "Oh my." "First Texas sunset?" Jack asked. "First any sunset like this. We did not see much sky in Boston." "Then I am glad I could show you this one." There was something in his voice that made Sarah look at him, but his face was turned toward the fading light, his expression unreadable. As darkness settled, the moon rose higher, bathing everything in silver light. "Are you up for a little more?" Jack asked. "There is a place I want to show you, but we will need to ride a bit faster. Just a gentle lope, nothing crazy. Willow knows the way." Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness, but it was overwhelmed by curiosity and a growing sense of trust. "Show me how." Jack demonstrated the cues for a lope, how to shift her weight and use her legs. "The key is to relax and move with her. Do not fight it, just feel the rhythm and become part of it. Ready, ready." Thunder moved forward into a smooth lope, and after a moment, Willow followed. Sarah felt the change in gait, the faster rhythm, and her first instinct was to tense up. But then she remembered Jack's words. "Relax. Feel the rhythm. Move with the horse," and suddenly she understood. The wind whipped past her face as they moved across the moonlit landscape. The mare's mane flew back, and Sarah felt like she was flying, like she had left everything that weighed her down back in Boston, back with Charles, back with all the expectations and limitations of her old life. This was freedom, pure and simple and intoxicating. This was what it felt like to be truly alive. They rode for perhaps 10 minutes before Jack slowed near a small creek that glittered in the moonlight. He dismounted and came to help Sarah down, his hand steady on her waist as she slid from the saddle. Her legs were shaky and she stumbled slightly, but Jack steadied her. "That was incredible," Sarah said, breathless and laughing. "That was the most incredible thing I have ever felt. I knew you would understand." Jack's face was close to hers, and in the moonlight his eyes seemed to glow. "Most people, they ride because they have to get places. But some people, they get it. They understand that riding is not just about going from one place to another. It is about the feeling, the connection with the horse, with the land, with something bigger than yourself." "Freedom," Sarah said softly. "Yes, freedom." They stood there for a moment longer before Jack stepped back, clearing his throat. "The horses need water, and Mrs. Henderson probably packed enough food for a small army. Knowing her, we should eat before we head back." They sat on a fallen log by the creek, watching the horses drink as they shared the biscuits and some dried apples Jack had brought. The moon painted everything in shades of silver and shadow, and the creek provided a gentle soundtrack to their conversation. "Tell me about the ranch," Sarah said. "The Broken Arrow. It is a good operation. The owner, Mr. Patterson, he is fair and smart about the business. We run about 2,000 head of cattle plus the horses. I started there when I was 16, just a ranch hand. Worked my way up to foreman by the time I was 25. I am 28 now, and I cannot imagine doing anything else. You love it." "I do. There is something about working with your hands, with the land and the animals. Every day is different. Every day has challenges. But it is real, you know, not like sitting in an office shuffling papers." "Not that there is anything wrong with that," he added quickly, "but it is not for me. I understand. I feel the same way about the work I am doing now for Mrs. Henderson. It is not what I planned, not what I thought I wanted, but there is something satisfying about it, something honest." Jack nodded. "Charles would have made you miserable, you know. He would have expected you to fit into whatever box he created, and you are not the kind of person who fits in boxes. You determined that after knowing me for 2 weeks. I have always been good at reading people. Goes with reading horses. You pay attention to what they do, not what they say. And everything you do says you are someone who needs space to breathe, to grow, to be yourself. Charles would have suffocated that." Sarah knew he was right. "What about you, Jack Garrett? What do you need?" He was quiet for a moment, staring at the moonlit water. "I need this. The land, the work, the freedom of it. I need to know that when I give my word, it means something. That when I care about someone, I can show them through action, not just words. I need honesty, even when it is hard. And I need someone who understands that sometimes I will come home covered in dust and exhausted, but I will still be happy because I love what I do." That does not sound like too much to ask. You would be surprised. Most women I have met want a man who works in town, who comes home clean, who has predictable hours. Nothing wrong with that, but it is not me. Then they were not the right women for you. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Sarah felt something shift between them. It was not dramatic or overwhelming, just a quiet recognition that something was beginning, something that could grow if they let it. "We should head back," Jack said, but he did not move. "We should," Sarah agreed, also not moving. Finally, Jack stood and offered his hand to help her up. "Same time next week. We can work on your loping technique, maybe try a few other things." "I would like that." The ride back to town was slower, both of them content to let the horses walk and enjoy the moonlit night. When they reached the edge of Trinity, Jack helped Sarah dismount outside Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. "Thank you," Sarah said, "for teaching me, for showing me that place, for everything." "Thank you for understanding," Jack replied. He tipped his hat and rode away, leaving Sarah standing in the moonlight, feeling more alive than she had in years. Mrs. Henderson was waiting in the parlor, pretending to read. "Did you have a nice time?" "I did. Jack is a good teacher." "He is a good man. I have known him since he was born. Never known him to take an interest in teaching anyone to ride before, though. He usually says he does not have the patience for beginners." "Maybe I am a natural," Sarah said with a smile. "Maybe," Mrs. Henderson agreed. "Or maybe you are special." Over the following weeks, Sarah fell into a new rhythm. Days were filled with work at the boarding house, which she found she genuinely enjoyed. She liked the routine of it, the satisfaction of a well-made meal or a clean room. She liked the other boarders and the steady stream of conversation at dinner. She liked Mrs. Henderson's forthright manner and the way she ran her household with efficiency and care. But it was the evenings with Jack that she began to live for. 3 times a week, they met at the old oak tree as the sun began to set. Each time, Jack taught her something new, how to canter properly, how to neck rein, how to read a horse's mood from its ears and posture. He taught her to saddle her own horse, to check hooves for stones, to understand the language that horses spoke without words. But more than that, they talked. About everything and nothing. About his childhood growing up in Trinity, about her life in Boston. About his dreams for his own ranch someday, about her discovery that she loved cooking and maybe wanted to start a small restaurant. About books they had read, places they wanted to see, ideas about life and meaning and purpose. Sarah learned that Jack was thoughtful and intelligent, that beneath his cowboy exterior was a mind that questioned and analyzed. He had educated himself through reading, borrowing books from anyone who would lend them, teaching himself about everything from animal husbandry to astronomy. He could identify constellations and explain the phases of the moon. He could talk about poetry as easily as he discussed cattle breeds. Jack learned that Sarah was brave and adaptable, that her humor remained sharp even when life knocked her down, that she had a fierce loyalty to the people she cared about. He learned that she noticed small details, remembered stories, asked questions that showed she was truly listening. He learned that she laughed with her whole body, and that she was not afraid to be honest, even when the truth was uncomfortable. One evening in late August, after they had been riding together for nearly 6 weeks, Jack suggested they ride out to the Patterson ranch. "Mr. Patterson and his wife have been asking to meet you. I may have mentioned that I was teaching someone to ride. You told them about me." Sarah felt pleased and nervous at the same time. "I tell them about most things. They are good people. You will like them." The Broken Arrow Ranch was impressive. The main house was large and well-maintained, surrounded by corrals and barns that spoke of prosperity and good management. Several cowboys were working horses in one of the corrals, and Sarah could see cattle grazing in the distance. Mr. Patterson was a big man in his 50s with a weathered face and kind eyes. His wife was small and energetic, with gray hair and a warm smile. They welcomed Sarah like she was already family. "So, you are the one who has been keeping our Jack busy in the evenings, Mrs. Patterson said, leading them into the house. "He talks about you constantly. Sarah this, Sarah that. Sarah has a natural seat. Sarah understands horses. Sarah asked the most interesting question." "Martha," Mr. Patterson said in a warning tone, but his eyes were twinkling. "What?" "I am just stating facts. Jack, why do you not show Sarah around while Martha embarrasses you further?" Jack laughed and took Sarah on a tour of the operation. He showed her the barns where they kept the horses, introducing her to several of his favorites. He showed her the tack room, the bunkhouse where the other cowboys stayed, the corrals where they worked the cattle. His pride in the place was evident in every word, every gesture. "This is what I want someday," he said as they stood on a small rise overlooking the ranch. "My own place. Nothing this big necessarily but mine. A few hundred acres, good grazing land, a house I build with my own hands, room to grow to build something that lasts." "You will have it," Sarah said with certainty. "I can tell. When you want something this badly, you find a way to make it happen." "Is that what you did? Found a way to make things happen?" "I am still figuring that out. But I think maybe I am starting to. Trinity is not what I expected, but it is becoming something better than what I planned." Jack looked at her, and there was something in his expression that made Sarah's breath catch. "Sarah, I need to tell you something." "All right. These past weeks, teaching you to ride, spending time with you, they have been the best part of my days. I know it has not been long, and I know you came here for someone else, but I need you to know that I have feelings for you, strong feelings, the kind that keep me up at night thinking about you, the kind that make me want to plan a future with you in it." Sarah's heart was pounding. "Jack, you do not have to say anything right now. I just needed to be honest with you. That is who I am. I do not play games and I do not hide what I feel. But I also do not want to pressure you. You have been through a lot and you deserve time to figure out what you want." "I do know what I want," Sarah said quietly. "That is what scares me. I have only been here 2 months. I should not feel this way so quickly. But when I am with you, everything makes sense. When I am riding under the moon with you, I feel more myself than I ever have. You asked me weeks ago what freedom feels like. I think I know now. It feels like this. It feels like being with someone who sees all of you and likes what they see. It feels like falling in love." Jack's face transformed, joy spreading across his features like sunrise. "Sarah, I am falling in love with you, Jack Garrett. Maybe I have been since the moment you picked up my trunk and made me laugh on the worst day of my life. I do not know how this happened so fast, but I know it is real. I know it in my bones." He closed the distance between them and took her face in his hands, his calloused palms gentle against her skin. "I am already in love with you, completely, totally. I look at you and I see my future. I see everything I have ever wanted. Can I kiss you, please?" His lips met hers, and it was nothing like the chaste kisses she had shared with Charles. This was fire and need and promise all wrapped together. This was two people who had found each other against all odds, against all logic, and refused to let go. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "Well," Mrs. Patterson's voice came from behind them, "I guess that settles that. Martha, you owe me $5. I said they would be kissing within the month, and here we are." Jack and Sarah jumped apart, both flushing. Mr. Patterson was standing with his wife, both of them grinning like they had just won a prize. "Were you betting on us?" Jack asked, torn between embarrassment and amusement. "Of course we were. You two have been dancing around each other for weeks. We were just waiting for one of you to make a move." Mrs. Patterson came forward and hugged Sarah. "Welcome to the family, dear, because if I know Jack, and I do, you will be married before the year is out." "Martha, give them time," Mr. Patterson said, but he was smiling too. "Although, for what it is worth, I agree with her. Jack, you have found a good one. Do not mess it up." "I do not intend to, sir." That night, as Jack rode Sarah back to town, they talked about the future. Not in concrete terms, not with specific dates or plans, but in possibilities and dreams. Jack talked about the land he had been saving for, about how he almost had enough for a down payment. Sarah talked about her growing savings and her idea for a restaurant, maybe a small place that served home-cooked meals to working people. "We could do both," Jack said. "Start a ranch and you could run a restaurant in town. Trinity is growing. There is definitely room for something like that. You would support me doing that, running my own business." "Why would I not? You are smart, hard-working, and the best cook I have ever met after my mother. It would be foolish not to support you doing what you are good at." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Charles had wanted her to help in a shop he would own, doing work he would direct, fitting into his plans. Jack was talking about her dreams, her goals, her future as something equally important to his own. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too." As summer turned to fall, their relationship deepened. They spent every possible moment together, and when they were apart, Sarah found herself thinking about him constantly. She learned his habits and quirks, how he always checked his horse's hooves twice before riding, how he hummed when he was working on something complicated, how his eyes crinkled at the corners when he was trying not to laugh, how he always made sure she was comfortable before worrying about himself. She met his parents properly, and they welcomed her warmly. His mother, Rachel, was delighted that her son had finally found someone. "I was starting to worry he would marry his horse," she joked over dinner. His father, Jonathan, was quieter but no less welcoming. He asked Sarah thoughtful questions about her plans and her dreams, and she could see where Jack got his intelligence and his integrity. In October, Jack took Sarah to a harvest dance in Trinity. It was her first real social event in town, and she was nervous about how people would react. After all, she had arrived in disgrace, publicly jilted by Charles Thompson, but any concerns vanished quickly. The people of Trinity had embraced her as one of their own. She was Mrs. Henderson's right hand, she was Jack Garrett's girl, and those two facts were apparently enough for everyone. Charles was there with Margaret, but Sarah barely noticed them. She was too busy dancing with Jack, laughing with the friends she had made, enjoying the music and the food and the simple pleasure of belonging. "Happy?" Jack asked as they danced under strings of lanterns that turned the barn into something magical. "So happy." "I did not think I could be this happy." "Get used to it. I plan on making you this happy for the rest of your life." "Is that a promise?" "It is a vow." In November, on a crisp evening when the first hints of winter were touching the air, Jack took Sarah back to the creek where they had eaten biscuits by moonlight all those months ago. He had packed a proper meal this time, and blankets against the cold. They ate and talked and watched the stars come out one by one. "Sarah," Jack said, setting down his plate and taking her hands, "I have something to ask you." She knew what was coming, had known for weeks, but her heart still raced. "I know it has only been a few months. I know some people would say it is too fast, too soon. But I also know what I feel and I know what I want. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build a life with you, a home with you, a future with you. I want to teach our children to ride. I want to support your dreams and have you support mine. I want all of it, everything with you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It was simple, a gold band with a small stone that caught the moonlight. "This was my grandmother's. My mother gave it to me years ago, said I would know when I met the woman I was supposed to give it to. I knew the first day I met you, Sarah. I knew you were going to change my life. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Sarah said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed her, and the stars wheeled overhead, and Sarah thought about how much her life had changed in such a short time. She had come to Trinity with plans that were not her own, in love with a man who did not deserve her. She had been lost and heartbroken and afraid. And then Jack Garrett had picked up her trunk and shown her what freedom really meant. He had taught her to ride under the moon. He had shown her that home was not a place but a person. He had given her space to discover who she truly was, and then loved everything he found. "When should we get married?" Sarah asked, wrapped in Jack's arms, wearing his grandmother's ring, feeling more right than anything had ever felt. "As soon as possible. Tomorrow, if the preacher is available." She laughed. "Let us give people at least a few weeks to prepare. What about Christmas? It is only 6 weeks away. We could have a winter wedding." "Christmas sounds perfect." The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of planning and preparation. Mrs. Henderson insisted on helping with everything, recruiting the other boarders to assist. Sarah sewed her own dress with help from Jack's mother and Mrs. Henderson, creating something simple but beautiful in cream-colored fabric. Jack worked extra hours to save more money, determined that they would start their married life on solid financial footing. They found a small house to rent on the edge of town, with enough land for a garden and a small barn. It was not the ranch Jack dreamed of, not yet, but it was theirs. They spent evenings cleaning and preparing it, painting walls and fixing shutters, turning it into a home. Sarah continued to work for Mrs. Henderson, but now they also talked seriously about the restaurant idea. Mrs. Henderson had connections in town, and she helped Sarah start planning. "You have a gift," she told Sarah. "Do not waste it. This town needs good food and a warm place to gather. You can provide that." Jack spoke with Mr. Patterson about the future. "I want my own place," he told his boss. "Not right away, but in a few years. I hope you understand." "I would be disappointed if you did not want that," Mr. Patterson said. "You are too good to work for someone else forever. When you are ready, I will help however I can. You are like a son to me, Jack. I want to see you succeed." On Christmas Eve, 1882, Sarah Oliverson married Jack Garrett in the small church in Trinity, Texas. The church was packed with everyone they knew, decorated with pine branches and candles that made everything glow. Sarah wore her cream dress and carried wildflowers that Jack had somehow found even in December. Jack wore his best suit, his hair slicked back, looking nervous and happy and impossibly handsome. The preacher kept the ceremony short and simple. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising honesty and support and love through whatever came. When Jack kissed his bride, the church erupted in applause and cheers. The reception was held at the boarding house, with food that Sarah and Mrs. Henderson had spent days preparing. There was music and dancing, toasts and laughter. Even Charles showed up briefly to offer awkward congratulations, which Sarah accepted graciously. She bore him no ill will now. He had inadvertently given her the greatest gift by being exactly who he was, forcing her to find her own path. "To freedom," Jack said during their first dance as husband and wife, "and to love. And to you, Sarah Garrett, for teaching me that they are the same thing." "To us," Sarah said, "and to moon rides and new beginnings and everything we are going to build together." That night, in their little house on the edge of town, they began their marriage with the same honesty and passion that had defined their courtship. They talked about dreams and made plans and held each other as the temperature dropped and the first snow of winter began to fall outside their window. "Are you happy?" Jack asked as they lay together, Sarah's head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I did not know happiness could feel like this. I did not know I could feel so complete." "This is just the beginning," he promised. "We have our whole lives ahead of us," and they did. They had a whole life, and they built it with the same care and commitment they had shown from the start. In the spring of 1883, Sarah opened her restaurant. It was small, just 6 tables in a rented space near the center of town, but it was hers. She called it the Moonlight Cafe in honor of those evening rides that had changed everything. She served simple, hearty food, the kind that working people could afford and appreciate. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 6 days a week, closed on Sundays. The restaurant was an instant success. People came for the food and stayed for the atmosphere Sarah created. She made everyone feel welcome, remembered their names and their preferences, created a space that felt like home. Within 6 months, she had to hire help. Within a year, she was looking at expanding to a larger location. Jack continued working at the Broken Arrow, saving every penny he could toward his dream of his own ranch. Mr. Patterson, true to his word, helped guide Jack through the process of finding land and securing loans. In 1884, Jack and Sarah bought 200 acres about 3 miles outside of Trinity. It was not much, but it was theirs. Good grazing land, a creek running through it, and enough space to grow. They spent the next year building. Jack, with help from friends and other cowboys, built a small house on their land. Nothing fancy, but solid and well-made, with a porch where they could sit and watch the sunset. They built a barn and corrals. They started with 20 head of cattle and 6 horses, including Willow and Thunder. Sarah continued running the restaurant, now with a partner she had taken on to help manage the increased business. She would work in town during the day, then come home to the ranch in the evening. It was exhausting, but it was also exhilarating. They were building something together, a life that was completely theirs. In the fall of 1885, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. They were ready, they told each other. They had a stable home, growing businesses, a strong relationship. They could do this. Their son was born in May of 1886, during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows and made Sarah laugh between contractions. "He is coming in dramatic," she said, and Jack held her hand and marveled at her strength. They named him James Patrick Garrett, after both their fathers. He had Jack's green eyes and Sarah's stubborn chin. He was healthy and loud and perfect. Being parents changed them, deepened them. Jack learned to balance ranch work with helping care for their son. Sarah learned to manage the restaurant while also being present for her baby. They learned to function on less sleep, to communicate in shorthand, to support each other through the exhaustion and the worry and the overwhelming love. James was a year old when Jack came home one evening with news. "Mr. Patterson is retiring. He wants to sell the Broken Arrow." "To who?" Sarah asked, bouncing James on her hip. "To me, if I want it. He is giving me first right of refusal, says I have earned it, that he trusts me to keep it going the right way." Sarah's eyes widened. "Jack, that is incredible. Can we afford it?" "Not easily. We would have to take on significant debt. We would need to expand our operation here while also managing the Broken Arrow. It would be a massive risk." He paused. "But I think we could do it. Together, I think we could make it work." They talked long into the night, weighing the risks and the rewards. It was Sarah who finally said, "Let us do it. Let us take the risk. You have been working toward your own ranch since before I met you. This is bigger than you dreamed, but you are ready. We are ready." In 1887, Jack Garrett became the owner of the Broken Arrow Ranch. He kept most of the existing cowboys on, promoted his best men to help him manage the increased responsibility, and threw himself into the work with renewed passion. It was the hardest thing he had ever done, but also the most rewarding. Sarah eventually sold her share in the restaurant to her partner, recognizing that she could not manage both the restaurant and support Jack in running two ranches. But she found she did not miss it as much as she thought she would. Her interests had shifted. She discovered she loved the ranch life, loved working with the animals, loved the rhythm of the seasons and the satisfaction of seeing the results of their labor. They had two more children. A daughter, Emily Rose, born in 1889, who had Sarah's blue eyes and a fearless spirit. And another son, Thomas James, born in 1892, who was quieter than his siblings but just as determined. The children grew up learning to ride almost before they could walk. Jack taught them the same way he had taught Sarah, with patience and respect for the horses. He taught them about the land, about hard work, about integrity. Sarah taught them about kindness, about education, about seeing the humanity in everyone. In 1895, they finally paid off the loan on the Broken Arrow. They celebrated quietly, just the two of them on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sunset like they had done countless times before. "Remember when you taught me to ride?" Sarah asked, her head on Jack's shoulder. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, sitting on that horse, laughing in the moonlight. I remember thinking I had never felt so free, and then realizing that freedom felt like falling in love." "Are you still in love?" Jack asked, turning to kiss her forehead. "More now than ever. Love grows, I have learned. It deepens and changes and becomes more solid. You are still the best decision I ever made, Jack Garrett. Even though I made you work so hard, even though life out here is not always easy, especially because of that. Easy would have been boring. This life we have built, with all its challenges and triumphs, this is exactly what I wanted without knowing I wanted it." Their children grew and found their own paths. James took over much of the ranch management, showing the same skill his father had. Emily surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, opening a school on the ranch property for the children of their workers and neighboring families. Thomas studied law and became a lawyer in Trinity, fighting for fair treatment of working people. Jack and Sarah watched their children grow with pride, knowing they had created not just a successful business, but a legacy of integrity and hard work. They had shown their children that love was a choice you made every day, that success was built on honesty and effort, that home was where you built it. They grew old together, gracefully and gratefully. Jack's hair turned silver, and his hands showed the wear of decades of ranch work, but his green eyes still sparkled when he looked at Sarah. Sarah's brown hair went gray, and lines appeared around her eyes from years of smiling, but she still moved with the confidence of a woman who knew exactly who she was. On their 30th anniversary, Jack surprised Sarah by taking her back to the creek where he had proposed. They were older now, slower, but they still rode out under the moon on Willow and Thunder's descendants. 30 years, Sarah said, sitting on the same fallen log, now more weathered but still solid. Can you believe it? Some days it feels like yesterday. Other days it feels like we have always been together. I am grateful for all of it. Every moment, every challenge, every triumph. You gave me the life I did not know I wanted. You gave me a partner in every sense of the word. Someone who built beside me, who dreamed with me, who never gave up even when things were hard. That is more than I ever hoped for. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the moon reflect on the water. The same moon that had watched over their first rides together, that had witnessed their first kiss, that had been present for every major moment of their lives. Tell me again, Sarah said. About the first time you saw me. Jack smiled. This had become a ritual over the years, retelling their story. I saw a woman standing in the street with a trunk that was far too heavy, trying to maintain her dignity even though her world had just collapsed. And I thought, that is someone special. That is someone who will not let life defeat her. That is someone I need to know. And I saw a stranger who showed kindness for no reason other than it was the right thing to do, someone who made me laugh on the worst day of my life, someone who looked at me and saw possibility instead of tragedy. And I taught you to ride under the moon. And I realized freedom feels like falling in love. Jack took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture so familiar it was like breathing. I would do it all again, exactly the same way. Every moment, every decision, every challenge. Because it led me here to you, to this life we built. Me too, Sarah said. Me too. They had 5 grandchildren by then, with more on the way. The ranch was thriving, expanded beyond what they had dreamed. The house had been added onto several times, now large enough to hold family gatherings where 3 generations crowded around tables groaning with food and laughter filled every room. Sarah and Jack began to slow down, letting their children take over more of the daily operations. But they never stopped being partners. They still took rides together when the weather was good. They still sat on the porch every evening, watching the sunset and talking about everything and nothing. They still held hands and stole kisses and looked at each other like newlyweds. In the spring of 1920, they celebrated their 38th anniversary. The family gathered at the ranch for a party that lasted all weekend. Children and grandchildren came from near and far. There was food and music and stories about the old days. Tell us how you met, the grandchildren begged, and Sarah and Jack told the story again. About the trunk and the betrayal and the kind stranger. About learning to ride under the moon. About falling in love with freedom and each other. The best things in life are unexpected, Sarah told her grandchildren. I came to Texas for all the wrong reasons and I found all the right ones. Remember that. Be open to possibility. Be brave enough to take risks. And when you find something real, Hold on to it with everything you have. And remember that love is not just a feeling, Jack added. It is a choice you make every day. Choose wisely, then choose consistently. That is the secret. That evening, after everyone had gone to bed, Sarah and Jack sat on the porch one last time. They were both in their late 70s now, their bodies showing the wear of a life fully lived. But their minds were sharp, and their love was as strong as ever. "It has been a good life," Sarah said quietly. "The best life," Jack agreed. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for building it with me. Thank you for teaching me to ride. Thank you for showing me what I was capable of. Thank you for loving me." They sat in silence, holding hands, watching the stars come out one by one, the same stars that had watched over them for nearly 4 decades. The same stars that would continue long after they were gone, watching over the legacy they had built. In the fall of 1922, Jack Garrett passed away peacefully in his sleep, with Sarah beside him. He was 78 years old and had lived every day of his life with purpose and integrity. His funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched. Cowboys who had worked for him, neighbors he had helped, children he had taught, friends he had made over a lifetime. They told stories about his fairness, his work ethic, his kindness, his love for his family. Sarah mourned him deeply, but she did not fall apart. She had learned long ago that she was strong, that she could survive anything. She missed him terribly, missed their evening talks and his quiet presence and the way he still made her heart skip after all those years. But she also felt grateful. Grateful for every moment they had shared, grateful for the life they had built, grateful for the love that had defined her entire adult life. She lived for 3 more years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She told stories about Jack, keeping his memory alive for the new generation. She made sure they knew about his dreams and his integrity, and the way he had built an empire through honest work and smart decisions. She also told them about herself, about the girl who had come to Trinity with no plan and no future, who had discovered her own strength and capability. She wanted her granddaughters especially to know that they could build their own lives, make their own choices, be their own people. On a cool evening in October 1925, Sarah Oliverson Garrett passed away in the house Jack had built for her, surrounded by the family they had created together. She was 76 years old. Her children held her hands and told her they loved her, and her last words were, "Tell your father I am coming. Tell him to have the horses ready. We have a lot of riding to catch up on." They buried her next to Jack on the ranch, under a large oak tree where they used to sit and watch the sunset. The headstones were simple, bearing their names and dates and a single inscription that summed up their entire story in 5 words. "Freedom feels like falling in love." The ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family. Each generation added their own chapter to the story, but they never forgot the foundation that Jack and Sarah had built. They remembered the lessons about hard work and integrity, about partnership and respect, about choosing love every single day. The grandchildren told their children about Jack teaching Sarah to ride under the moon, about how she had arrived in Trinity broken and lost, and found herself in the most unexpected way, about how they had built something lasting not just in terms of property and business, but in terms of love and family and legacy. And sometimes, on clear nights when the moon was bright, ranch hands would swear they saw 2 figures riding across the fields. A man and a woman, moving in perfect harmony, laughing in the moonlight. Just a trick of the light, people would say. But those who knew the story understood better. It was Jack and Sarah, still riding together, still free, still in love. Because some bonds are not broken by death. Some love stories do not end. They just continue in different forms. living on in the memories and hearts of those left behind, in the legacy built by two people who found each other against all odds and refused to let go. Trinity, Texas grew and changed over the years, but the story of Jack Garrett and Sarah Oliverson remained. It was told at weddings and anniversaries, shared as an example of what love could be when two people truly committed to each other. It was a reminder that the best things in life are often unexpected, that freedom and love are not contradictory but complementary, that courage is not the absence of fear but the willingness to take risks anyway. And somewhere, perhaps, under a bright moon, two souls still ride together across endless plains, free and happy and eternally in love, living the truth that Sarah discovered all those years ago. That freedom feels like falling in love, and love feels like coming home. The Broken Arrow Ranch stands still, now run by the great-great-grandchildren of Jack and Sarah Garrett. The house has been updated and modernized, but the bones remain the same. The barn where Jack taught his children to ride still stands. The oak tree where they are buried is tended carefully, surrounded by wildflowers that bloom every spring. Visitors to the ranch sometimes ask about the couple in the old photographs that hang in the main house. The current generation tells the story with pride. About the Boston woman who came west for the wrong reasons and stayed for the right ones. About the cowboy who saw strength and possibility in a stranger and offered his hand. About how they built an empire on love and hard work and unwavering commitment to each other. And sometimes, just sometimes, when the moon is full and bright, those same visitors swear they hear hoofbeats in the distance, followed by laughter carried on the wind. The family just smiles and nods. They know. They have always known. Jack and Sarah Garrett's love story did not end with death. It transformed into something bigger, something that touched everyone who heard it. It became a beacon of hope, a reminder that true love exists, that partnership means building something together, that the best adventures are the ones you never planned. Their story proved that sometimes the worst moments in life lead to the best outcomes. That being lost is sometimes necessary to being found. That freedom is not just about open spaces and wild horses, but about finding someone who lets you be completely yourself. That falling in love and staying in love require the same thing: courage, honesty, and the willingness to choose each other every single day. In the end, Jack Garrett had taught Sarah more than how to ride a horse. He had taught her about trust and partnership. He had shown her what it meant to be supported and encouraged. He had given her space to discover her own strength while always being there to catch her if she stumbled. And Sarah had taught Jack that love was not a weakness but a strength. That being vulnerable with the right person made you stronger, not weaker. That dreams were better when shared. That a true partner made everything in life better, richer, more meaningful. Together, they had proven that love stories are not just about feelings but about choices. About choosing to work hard even when it would be easier to quit. About choosing to communicate even when it would be simpler to stay silent. About choosing to grow together rather than apart. About choosing to see the best in each other, especially during the worst times. Their legacy lived on not just in land and cattle and business success, but in the example they set. In the way their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren approached relationships. In the respect and partnership that defined the Garrett family for generations. In the understanding that true success was measured not in dollars, but in love, in family, in the impact you had on the people around you. The town of Trinity, Texas, grew from a small frontier settlement to a thriving community, and the Garrett family was always part of its foundation. They gave to the schools and the church. They supported local businesses. They treated their workers fairly and paid them well. They lived the values that Jack and Sarah had established from the very beginning. And through it all, the story of how they met, how they fell in love, how they built their life together remained the cornerstone of everything. It was told and retold, embellished and cherished, passed down like a precious heirloom. Because it was more than just a love story. It was a reminder of what was possible when two people found each other at exactly the right moment, even if it seemed like the wrong one. Sarah Oliverson had boarded a stagecoach in Boston in 1882 with her whole life planned out. She had known exactly what her future would hold, down to the smallest detail. And then, in one devastating moment, those plans had shattered. But from the wreckage of her expectations, something far better had emerged, a life she could never have imagined. A love that exceeded anything she had dreamed. A partnership that defined her and shaped her and made her into the woman she was meant to become. Jack Garrett had been living his life with quiet determination, working toward his goals with steady persistence. He had been content with his path, satisfied with his choices. And then a woman with a heavy trunk and a broken heart had stepped into his world, and everything had changed. He had taught her to ride under the moon, those evenings that became the foundation of everything that followed. And in teaching her about horses and freedom and the beauty of the Texas landscape, he had discovered his own heart's deepest desire. Not just a ranch or success, but someone to share it all with. Someone who understood him completely and loved him anyway. Someone who was his equal in every way that mattered. Their story was not perfect. They faced challenges and setbacks. There were years when money was tight, when the work seemed overwhelming, when they wondered if they had taken on too much. There were losses and sorrows, struggles and fears. But through it all, they had each other. They had built a foundation strong enough to weather any storm, and that foundation was their unwavering commitment to each other. They had proven that love was not about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was about showing up every day. It was about doing the work, having the hard conversations, making the compromises, celebrating the victories together and weathering the defeats as a team. It was about choosing each other not just once, but over and over again, in 1,000 small ways every single day. And in doing so, they had created something that outlasted them both. A legacy of love that continued to inspire everyone who heard their story. A reminder that the best things in life are worth working for, that true partnership makes everything better, that freedom and love are not contradictory but complementary. The moonlight still fell on the Texas plains, just as it had that first night when Jack took Sarah riding. The stars still wheeled overhead in their eternal patterns. The land still stretched out endlessly in all directions, full of possibility and promise. And somewhere in it all, the spirit of two people who had loved each other completely and built something beautiful together lived on, eternal and undiminished by time. Because some love stories do not end. They just become part of the landscape, part of the air, part of the very essence of a place. They become the standard by which all other love is measured. They become proof that true love exists, that it can last, that it can transform everything it touches. Jack and Sarah's love story became all of that and more. It became legend. It became inspiration. It became a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever felt lost, anyone who had ever had their plans destroyed, anyone who had ever wondered if real love was possible. And the answer, their story said clearly, was yes. Yes, real love exists. Yes, it can last. Yes, it is worth fighting for, working for, sacrificing for. Yes, it can exceed your wildest dreams. Yes, it can transform your entire life. Yes, yes, yes. All you have to do is be brave enough to take the risk, to trust the stranger with kind eyes who picks up your trunk, To climb on a horse even though you are scared. To let yourself feel even though you have been hurt. To build something new even when the old plans are in ruins. All you have to do is be willing to learn that freedom feels like falling in love. And love, real love, feels like finally coming home.